So we're going to now hear from Sally Wainwright. She's from Scotland. She's the WDI country contact for Scotland, and she is going to talk about the WDI, that's Women's Declaration International 2022 report, which will be published in October-ish, about the spread of gender identity ideology around the world, and also about the Scottish consultation. So thank you so much, Sally, and over to you.
So I'm going to talk about the book, as Jo said, but first I just want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Scotland. A lot of you have possibly heard by now that the government's trying to introduce self-ID. So there's a new piece of legislation sort of in front of the Parliament at the moment called the Gender Recognition Reform Act, which will basically do three main things. It will allow self-ID, and in order to get a gender recognition certificate, which acknowledges you as a member of the opposite sex, you need to live as a member of the preferred gender. What on earth that means, I don't know, but you have to live as if you were in the acquired gender for a mere 3 months. And then you just go to a judge and you say, I've been living like a woman for the last 3 months and I intend to do that for the rest of my life. And they go, here you are, here's your gender recognition certificate. Now you're legally a woman. That is it. Well, there's a sort of another 3-month trial period, but basically at the end of 6 months, that is it. So there's absolutely no safeguarding for women, nothing to prevent sex offenders, violent men, or money launderers, if it comes to that, or anybody else who wants to get these things for sort of nefarious purposes. There's nothing to stop them from just getting a certificate very, very simply. And the other thing is there's no protection for people transitioning legally, because we've seen loads and loads of detransitioners, an increasing number of detransitioners, and the bill does not allow for people to change their minds. And that's particularly worrying because the second provision is that they're going to lower the age at which you're going to be able to self-ID into the opposite gender to the age of 16. So we're going to have a bunch of confused adolescent gay boys and lesbians being told, really, well, it's all right, you're not queer, you're just a heterosexual member of the other sex, and going off and self-IDing as the opposite gender. So that's very, very worrying. It means from Scotland's point of view, because if you're in England, you should, or the rest of the UK, England's Wales or Northern Ireland, you should worry about this. Because GRC's gender recognition certificates that are issued here are valid in the whole of the UK. And the requirement to be able to get one if you weren't born in Scotland is that you are ordinarily resident here, but there's no definition of ordinarily resident. And they could interpret it in any which way. Maybe you're just renting a house for 2 weeks and then you can say that you're ordinarily resident. So Scotland's going to become a tourist destination for 16-year-olds who want to get married, because the age of marriage has just been raised in England and Wales, I'm not sure about Northern Ireland, to 18, but it's still 16 here, and you don't need parental consent. So we're going to have 16-year-olds coming to Gretna Green, which is the southernest point in Scotland where people have traditionally come to take advantage of Scottish marriage laws. We have 16-year-olds coming to Scotland, both to get married and also to legally change their gender. And then they're going to come back to the rest, elsewhere in Britain. So there is a consultation. The parliamentary committee, which is looking at this, is doing its own consultation. The government's done a couple and ignored every single word that women's rights organisations have said over the last 2 years. But the parliamentary committee, which is consists of members of the Scottish Parliament, which will be a cross-party committee, has got a consultation. Unfortunately, it finishes on Monday, but I'm going to ask anybody who lives anywhere in the UK, if you could take just 10 minutes and complete the consultation. It would be really, really good, because there's two versions of it. There's a sort of long version with, there's a dozen questions, I think, with text boxes where you can write something. If you've got time to write a dozen sentences, that's ideal. But there's also a short version, which has just got tick boxes. And literally you can just tick things. In the chat afterwards, I'll put some links, if that's okay, also to some information about what you might want to say. WDI Scotland has done, or is in the process of putting in a lengthy consultation response, but the more voices that we can get speaking for us, the better. So I hope everybody will do that. And if you want to know anything, please feel free to get in touch with me. I've got some information that I can just send out to anybody who wants it. So yeah, if it sounds like madness personified, that's because it is. But that's our First Minister for you, I'm afraid. So really, when we see this sort of thing happening in Scotland, but I know it's not only happening in Scotland, it's happening in so many places around the world, I think it makes the idea of us doing a book or a report even more important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book. As Joe said, we hope to publish that in October. And our current working title, as Joe mentioned, is The Spread of Gender Ideology Around the World. But the more I've been thinking about it, the more I think actually, as the Women's Declaration, I'm not sure that we really want to be putting them, the gender ideologists, first and foremost in the title of our publication. So maybe we need to think about something else, such as, I don't know, a report on women's sex-based rights around the world, or something like that, or the attack on sex-based rights around the world even. I haven't mentioned this to the working group yet, by the way, so don't tell them that you heard it here first. Anyhow, the content of the book is possibly more important. So I'm going to start at the back. The second half of the book will be a country survey, and we've drawn up a questionnaire which is based on the declaration. So there's sort of questions about each article in the declaration to ask how far your country, what your country is doing in relation to those issues. We've invited all the country contacts to complete the survey. Obviously, we only need one response from each country. So we're hoping that the country contacts will do it. If you are a country contact, there should be an email in your country@womensdeclaration.org email account. But if there isn't, or if you haven't seen it or whatever, again, please get in touch with me and I will send you the details. The point about the survey is that it will allow us simply to compare the state of affairs in different countries around the world, because we'll get everybody's information will be presented in a similar way. It was very interesting developing the questionnaire, for me anyway, because the first sort of version that we did, I realized had a real kind of, I don't know, first world bias or bias towards, the way that things happened here. So it's great because since then, Vaishnavi and Phoenix and Eugenia have all got involved in the working group, which has really made a big difference in terms of helping us kind of think about the different ways that things work in different countries and in different parts of the world. So we've tried to put fairly general questions. So hopefully it'll be possible for them to be completed by everybody, and there's room to make comments otherwise. So as I say, if you are a country contact, can you either check your emails? If you can't do it, could you let us know that you won't be able to do it? And maybe if you know anybody else who would be able to do it that you can recommend, that would be really, really helpful. The second half of the book is something that actually anybody has the opportunity to contribute to. Well, it'll be the first half, actually, it'll be the opening half, but we're going to have a series of articles about sex-based rights and gender identity ideology. And we're looking for good quality, well-researched articles on a broad range of relevant topics and areas. And I expect most of you get the newsletter, which goes out on Wednesdays or fortnightly. So in the next newsletter, there'll be kind of a formal invitation to put in a proposal if you would like to write an article. And just to tell you a little bit about what we'll be looking for, if you want to think about it, if you might be interested. Okay, so the proposal, we're just looking for a kind of brief summary of what you might want to write about. But the article articles that we publish must relate to the aims of the declaration in some way. So probably looking at the state of sex-based rights and or gender identity ideology. It can focus on one part of the declaration or all of it. You know, you might want to write an article, for example, about the way that women's sports have been affected by men being allowed to compete in female categories. And that's okay. You know, that's just relates to one article of the declaration, but it's, you know, it would still be of interest. The articles themselves can be up to about 2,000 words, so not too long, so that we've got space to include quite a few. The other thing that's really important is that they must have a geographic focus, which kind of relates to the declaration, but also to our attempt to kind of look at how things are around the world. But when we say geographic focus, that might be a country, it might be a continent, it could be a political grouping like the UN, for example, or the European Union. So it doesn't have to be just your country, but it has to have some relation to place, because we're looking at things around the world. The articles obviously will need to be, I'm afraid, in English, but don't worry if your English isn't perfect, because we can help with that kind of editing and things. In general, our aims are to include articles from a range of different countries and geographic areas. So we're unlikely, for example, to publish just several articles about, I don't know, Scotland or even the UK, for example. Certainly not more than two, probably only one. But countries could well be included in articles looking at a wider geographic area. So you might have an article about Brazil and another one about South America, for instance, that might include information from Brazil. And we're also looking for articles to cover a range of topics. So if we get several proposals, to take the same example on sports, you know, we'll pick one, or if they're very, very, you know, so that we get a range of information in the book. If we accept the proposals, we will try to publish all of the articles, but depending on the length and the quality of the articles and how many we get in at the end of the day, it's possible that that won't happen. But if in that case, we would look to publish them somewhere else, possibly on our website and possibly something else. Because we're aware that there might be quite a number of good proposals that we can't include, in which case I think we should look at other ways of publishing as well as on our website. One suggestion, for example, is, let's say that there was, you know, 7 or 8 really interesting proposals from France, then there would be nothing to stop us or France, the French WDI group, from publishing them as a separate little booklet or something. So, you know, don't be put. What I'm really trying to say is that if we get good ideas in for things, we will look at ways of making them available. And of course, if they're not published in the general report, then they might be in French or whatever language it is. So that's probably an advantage to not publish everything in English.